Every day, ordinary people make extraordinary choices as they negotiate unpredictable pathways to the peak of their expectations without ever taking the time to enjoy the view. Join me, Tish Tyndall, at this panoramic viewpoint of astonishing personal and professional progress as we find out why my next guest is living the fabulous life. So, Ali Al Khafaji, how are you?
I'm great. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Do you know, Ali, I've been practicing saying your name.
I noticed you got it down to a T. I'm impressed.
That's because I've got it in great big writing there, and I've been sending Elizabeth, the producer, little audio clips of me saying your name this afternoon. So I have really worked on this.
I'm impressed. It usually takes even family members a while to get it right.
What a fabulous name. Where does it come from?
So my dad's from Baghdad, Iraq. So that's actually where it originated.
Oh, wonderful. And you yourself, have you always been living in Texas?
I was originally from Illinois, and then I've lived in Austin now for about 9 years.
Wow. And, I've been reading up on you this week, and your career so far, Ali, is really outstanding. You have so many films on Amazon. You are a writer, you are a producer, a director, you're an actor, you are a singer, you are a rapper, you are a musician. I could go on and on and on. I want to bow to you. My goodness, Ali, where did it start? What did you do first?
Well, first of all, thank you. You're way too kind.
No, it's the truth.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. No, I actually started in engineering, oddly enough.
Wow. I wasn't expecting that one.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does. No, I went to school for construction management, and I did that for about 9.5 years. And
Okay.
yeah, I worked for various general contractors, and whenever I had free time, I would try to do music because that was the only thing I could do where I didn't have to rely on somebody. And then
Oh, I
from that,
see.
yeah, from that, just kind of being, on my weekends, whenever I had free time, I would try to make songs. And then my friend said, let's turn this into a music video. And he was going to film school, and it just kind of snowballed from there. I was like, I love doing this. This is more of my calling, I felt, than engineering was.
And you've got one of the best websites I think I've ever seen for an artist because it shows us everything that you do. It absolutely, I mean, even like the commercials that you make, for example,
Mhm.
it shows us everything that you do. How hard is it, do you think, to give that to somebody in sort of one click? Is that something you've worked at to get the marketing right?
It's always kind of a work in progress, and I think that's kind of the beauty with kind of being in a pandemic. If you have to find a silver lining, it's the fact that we're so quick to move on to the next project without looking back at how we've packaged things we've done. And so it gave me an opportunity to kind of slow down and say, well, what's the best showcase of all this material? It's nice to move on to something new, but we need to reflect. And so that's the constant growing pains of finding the best way to market. And I think it evolves.
That's really interesting because my guests last week, Unsung Lily, they were saying the same thing. They were saying that, now that things have slowed down for them a little, they've been, using this time to actually look at everything they've created and, take stock of all of that because it's a lot of work, isn't it? Do you find that you are always trying to meet the next deadline?
Oh, definitely. And I think a lot of filmmakers can relate to the fact, or even just creatives in general, is that not only pushing to get that deadline, not just pushing to get in pre-production and production and post and wrapping everything up, but once you actually create something and release it, there's this kind of empty feeling because you don't have
Yeah.
something else lined up.
Yeah.
And so I think the patience that we've learned through this whole experience has taught me a lot just about, it's nice to move on to something new, but it's also nice to be proud of what you've done. And so that's the key takeaway for me, at least this past year.
And do you think you knew that before, Ali, or do you think that's something that you now know? Is it something that you always knew, or is it because of the pandemic that you've realized this?
I would say because of the pandemic, to be completely honest. It's and I still learn from it. It's not I still probably have this tendency to want to move on to a next thing and say what's on the
Yeah,
dock. And I
yeah.
think everybody does, because
Oh,
even if
yeah.
you go to a film festival, they say, what's next? Right? We're so used to hearing what's next.
Yes, absolutely.
But
And we
this is,
put these demands on ourselves,
yeah,
you
exactly.
know? And
Exactly.
so, everything that's on Amazon is so dynamic.
Mhm.
And can you tell me about that? When you got your first film on Amazon, how did that happen and how did it feel?
Well, to answer how it happened, it was actually a competition for diversity in film. And so so my friends reached out to me and said, you have a interesting Middle Eastern background with very different shorts.
Sure.
This might be a good showcase for you. So I jumped on that opportunity. They hosted the first film and then created an account for me. And that's kind of been the avenue for pushing out my shorts, just so that the widest audience possible can see it. Um,
And just for listeners who don't know what the short is, could you explain that?
just the short film medium in
Yeah.
general. Yeah, so short film, a lot of times filmmakers might not have the budget, or they might not be ready to take on a feature length film, which would be anywhere from 40 minutes to, 2.5 hours in a lot of cases. Short films are typically, 20 minutes or less, and it just gives you an opportunity to see if a concept works and to see how an audience responds to it. A lot of people will also call them proof of concept. Um,
I see.
it's a good way to whet the appetite of an audience and then see if this could be expanded into something bigger.
And okay, so for me, writing musical theatre, it's like taking it to a fringe, perhaps, where you're taking a shorter prototype, something that is definitely the idea, but if audiences like it, you would probably expand it. Is that the same?
Oh, exactly the same. And a lot of times, what feature filmmakers will do, a good example would be the movie Whiplash, if you've heard of that.
Okay. Yep.
So Damien Chazelle did Whiplash as a short, but what he did is he took one scene from the movie that he thought was a very pivotal scene, and he shopped that to Sundance to see if producers would bite, to see if it was something they were interested in. From that short, he got to recast it, he got to get the right team behind it, and then turned it into this feature length movie that went on to win, Academy Awards.
Wow. And do you see yourself doing that with any of your shorts then?
Yes, my plan is to turn one of my shorts into a feature length movie, and I'm in the writing stages of that. But kind of, as I mentioned, it was a good trial to see if audiences liked it or not, because I had never made a film before with a cast and crew, and seeing the audience respond to it was, it was very overwhelmingly positive and better than I could have hoped for. So I said, there's at least an interest, and all I needed was an interest. If there's no
Yeah.
interest, then I don't want to waste people's time, money, or effort to get it done.
And so then is that the same with your music? Because on your website, and I've watched it so many times now, the video with yourself and the young guy there, he's fantastic, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's wonderful.
Oh,
And and you've both got on the same vests, and it's just so wonderful and so dynamic, and the paper going everywhere. It's so clever.
yeah.
And all the references to Phil Collins, and it's so clever, about the studio. I loved that.
Thank you
So
so much.
tell me a little bit. Oh, you're most welcome. Tell me a little bit about how that grew, because it's not you know, there's rap, there's song, there's music, there's theater, there's film, there's everything in that. It almost looks like something you would see in, you know, a massive billboard, you know, playing a video of an advert. It's so special. Can you give us the background to that?
Yeah, of course. Actually, so for that one in particular, Been This Way, it was the other person that kind of rapped and sang on that video with me. We went to middle school together, and we always
Wow.
used to we just loved music, anything music. And it wasn't just, you know, we would listen to boy band music back in middle
Yeah.
school. And
Yeah.
so it really, there was a wide variety. We just were really entranced by it. And we kept in touch over all these years. And he reached out to me and said, you know, I sent him a track just digitally, and I said, hey, could you put a verse on this? He did it in 2 days, sent it back to me, and then 3 years later, he said, I'll be in Austin. Would you have time to shoot a music video? And I said, well, that's going to be tough. That's like a production. You have to get a team together and all this. But what you saw was basically three people getting together and just making it happen in the spur of the moment.
And it is fabulous. I mean, it really is wonderful. So the concept was there, and then was it put to just to bed for the rest for those 3 years?
Yeah, pretty much. And that's what's funny too, is you'll hear about a lot of filmmakers that sit on ideas, and musicians where they're like, you know, the track was 90% and then we put it on the shelf, and then
Yeah,
it finds a new life somehow. And that's kind of how this was. We recorded it just to make ourselves happy, and then it sat on the shelf. And he said, let's make a video to it.
yeah.
And so just kind of, you know, lighting that fire and keeping that momentum. Sometimes it takes somebody else to push you and say, let's just do it.
Oh, absolutely, doesn't it? And it's so important to have like-minded people around you, and people who have your best interests and the interests of your creativity surrounding you. Do you find that you have that?
Oh, absolutely. I think the support system is key, because, and I think you can relate. You said you do theater, musical
Yep,
theater.
yep.
Yes. So musical theater, you have an ensemble, and if
Mm.
people aren't, if their heart isn't in it, then it's debilitating to you as a creative. You start to say, well, what am I chasing if it's just for me? And
Yeah.
so I think it's important to, you know, indulge some critique, and indulge some momentum, indulge some support, but you know, not one works without the other. And so you need to be collaborative in nature. And I've been fortunate to have some great collaborators that just push me to the finish line.
And that's the thing, you know, and it's done in such a supportive way with kindness. How important do you think kindness is in this industry in particular?
And well, that's actually a great question, because I read a lot about that. I read about filmmakers and their styles, and the type of atmosphere they create on set, and what it's conducive to. So I would say kindness. I think it's important no matter what, because I wouldn't want to do it unless I was smiling. but
Absolutely.
but you know, there are filmmakers out there. The old school way of thinking is Stanley Kubrick would want to create The Shining, and there's a very controversial approach that he had with Shelley Duvall of doing, you know, hundreds upon hundreds of takes, to the point where she was exhausted. And
Sure.
even though the film is iconic, is that really what you want to do with your life? And so it just depends on the atmosphere. Like, I really enjoy comedy, because that type of levity just makes me smile at the end of the day. And I
Yeah.
don't want to create an environment that feels hostile or unnerving. And so I think kindness is imperative for what I'm doing, but I know it's not necessary for others.
And it's really interesting because one of your trailers, I was watching it today actually,
Mhm.
and how do you pick those moments for the trailer? How, you know, I don't know if I could pick moments from a song. I'd be like, oh gosh, am I putting the right bit in? You know, how do you do that? Because these are so visually stunning and so to the point. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like hard to judge your own highlight reel.
Yeah.
You look at things and you try to be a little bit objective. I'm kind of hardest on my own work, so a lot of times
Of
I
course.
even if I'm the star in something, I try to pull it away from my face as much as possible and just show
Yeah.
off an ensemble.
Yes.
But I think with trailers, you're just looking for movement. A lot of people love movement, and so I always look for, where's a hand moving,
Oh.
where's the face dynamic, where is an action moment, and that's what usually grabs my attention, at least lately.
Yeah. And do you find that people react well to that type of trailer?
Yeah, I mean, people have reacted favorably. It's once again, it's kind of weird with shorts because shorts are already so short that a shorter version of that is just kind of odd. But it's a fun trial and error. I think it's kind of like practicing for the Olympics. You get to see like what doesn't work.
Yeah. And then do you change it if it doesn't work? Or
Oh,
do you ask somebody else?
absolutely. I change it all the time. There's like 5 different versions of every film, of every trailer. I'll spend years on the color sometimes, and I'll even show my girlfriend, and she's like, I don't notice a difference.
That's interesting because the one thing I noticed about these trailers is the color.
Yeah, yeah.
That's incredible because that really does come across. What makes you decide upon the color for things then?
So that's something that I respect colorists like crazy now, because I've tried to do a lot of things myself, from sound design to sound mix and color. And those are things that make or break a movie, in my opinion, especially if you pay attention to color theory. The Some of my favorite movies, like Her, is a good example, where they'll just have a color palette of 3 dynamic colors, and there'll be a base color that plays throughout the movie, and maybe an accent color that's maybe red or pink or whatever it may be. And so colorists do a fantastic job, after the director and the production design hone in on a look, and try to at least kind of landscape those colors. The colorists really figure out, how do you draw the audience eyes to the character, or what's most important in the scene. So that's like a big
Oh.
important part that a lot of people, you wouldn't notice it unless it was wrong.
So that seems to be so important in your filmmaking. Was that a choice?
Yes. And as I mentioned, I keep learning from things. There are past films and experiences where I say I would have done that completely different, but
Okay.
you kind of learn by failing. And so I appreciate some of those growing pains that I've gone through. But and kind of circling back to the musical aspect of it, I think filmmaking should follow tempos. It should have crescendos. It should have bridges. It should have moments that let you breathe. So it actually, a lot of my favorite movies are musically driven, and so that's kind of a format I love to follow. And it's and same, going back to the color theory of it. If it's wrong, people will notice it. If you do it right, nobody will ever mention it.
That's very true. And so are you writing all your own original scores too?
Yes, I for the majority of my films, I love doing the score. That's a lot of fun. I would love to collaborate on a bigger level in the future. If I get to tackle a feature length, I would love to work with like a full orchestra or whatever our budget allows. But especially for short films, I just try to think of the best way to crank them out the cheapest.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose. And do you have a recording studio at home?
My recording studio, you're basically looking at it.
It's amazing now though, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible what you can do now. And that's
Oh,
something else that I think lockdown has taught us all.
oh, it's fantastic. And you know, especially so back, I would say probably like the 60s and 70s, a lot of retro sounds were only associated with sci-fi. And the reason that we associated that vintage kind of keyboard synth sound with sci-fi is because it was cheap. But now
Oh,
we've kind
really?
of circled back around, and people like shows like Stranger Things, and they like movies like Drive, and those are very synth heavy films. And the score has become kind of this nostalgia kick for a lot of people. And so it's actually still the cheapest medium is to make a synth
Mhm.
score. But George Lucas was actually the first person to take an orchestra and put it to a sci-fi movie. So I love the fact that we've circled back around and I can continue making cheap synth scores and people don't get mad.
Well, they don't sound cheap, I can tell you that. They are really quite something. Ali, you're like an encyclopedia. This is fantastic. You know, we have a performing arts college, and one of the things that we really want to move into is film and filmmaking.
Mhm.
What what would you say to young students who would like to move into that medium? You know, whether they're coming from dance, from acting, from singing, from theatre. You know, what's that next step to move into film?
Definitely. So the most important thing that I've always taken away from any just creative, and that's not filmmaker, that's not musician, that's everything in the arts industry, is do something that only you could do and do it well. So that's the most important thing. You learn from mistakes, and it's okay to fail, but just make sure that you're not doing, a watered down version of something you've already seen. If you could
Yeah.
if you could make it as original as possible, whatever that may be, just make sure it's true to your voice, not
Yeah.
a carbon copy of somebody that already exists. Because it's
Yeah.
better to be, the first version of something bad than a great version of something that already exists.
Well, that's wonderful. Yes, it absolutely is, and great advice. Because I think sometimes youngsters are looking to try and be their idols. You know, they're trying to be the people that they think they should be. And I suppose we do still live in an age of the kind of the overnight success with reality television, and stuff like that. Do you think that you've struggled as a creative? You know, have there been times where you've thought about giving it up, Ali?
Oh, every day.
Yeah.
I think it would be foolish for anybody to say that you don't think about it at some point. And I think there was some advice that I heard from I think it was Wes Anderson, cinematographer. He had said, if there's ever a day that I show up on set and I'm not scared, I'll quit.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's key. There should be a little bit of nerves, there should be a little bit of fear, and that's exciting. That's why we want to learn and grow. Being open to anything going wrong is just a learning experience. It's trial and error, and it's exciting. That's why we do it.
Yes, it's so lovely to hear you say that, because when you look at your work, you would just you would never think that there were any errors or that there's ever been anything wrong, because your work is so dynamic and it's so, I want to say self-assured, and I don't mean that as in you're self-assured. I mean that the work really has something to say, and it knows what it has to say, and it hits you the moment you you click on it, and it's as simple as that. And when we were talking about inviting you on the show, Elizabeth, the producer, said, Ali is amazing. He does everything, you know,
I,
and he's got his own film festival, you know. And when I started looking into you, it was like, what don't you do? What is there that you don't do? But I'm getting the feeling that if there was something that you couldn't do, you would find out how to do it anyway. Is that right?
I would try to, or I would find somebody who's better at it than me and work with them. I think
So
that's
then that comes back to the kindness, doesn't it?
mhm. I think
And
that's important is know your strengths, but also know your weaknesses. Be willing
mhm.
to learn. And I listen to so many more self-assured filmmakers than me. and they still struggle. And that's kind of invigorating to me. I appreciate the transparency on those ends, and I hopefully can be as transparent with my cast and crew and anybody else who wants to be a filmmaker, because you know I know I've struggled. I know other people have struggled, and I know that they question their career on a day-to-day basis. But as I mentioned, I think it's important to know that you're not alone in that.
And I think that will ring out with anybody who watches this podcast. And you know, something happened to me actually just today, where I was showcasing a new piece of work to the cast, and I was petrified, Ali. I was absolutely petrified, and I don't know why. And sometimes I think it's really nice to be reminded of that kind of openness. And you know, because you are, when you show somebody something, when you showcase something, you are opening up your heart and your thoughts and your creativity.
Yeah.
When you are working with your film festival,
Hmm.
how important do you think it is for you to respond to the people who are submitting their work in a way in which, you know, can only be encouraging?
I think it's very key to how people feel about the festival, especially after the fact. The last thing you're going to remember is if somebody acknowledged you in a way that wasn't dismissive. So it's been very important to me that I connect with filmmakers on a level that's beyond just saying "good job, you're selected" or "good job, you win an award." Trying to key into things that really impacted me, especially because while I have a panel of 12 judges,
Yeah.
not all of them get to talk to every filmmaker. And a lot of times their correspondence is with me. So if I have the opportunity, I like to single out maybe a scene or a moment that really stuck with me, because that's what that's what I'd like to hear as a filmmaker, is that,
Yeah.
you know, I thought your short was good is a very generic comment, but saying I really like the score, or I really like the performance of this actress or this actor, or the ensemble, or I really like the scene where it was raining outside and how did you pull that off? Those type of specifics let people know that this is beyond just a pat on the back. This is people who take your work seriously and admire some of the elements that you're curating.
Yeah, and it's so important also because I suppose then it lets them understand that you do know what they've been through, and you do know what they're going through, and you know what it is they are creating, and to be knowledgeable, and to be somebody who could maybe mentor them slightly. Do you ever feel that you become a mentor?
Yeah, not intentionally, but
No.
it's
Yeah.
happened. Both my parents are teachers, so it's funny. I never thought I'd be a teacher in any aspect, but I've had people come up to me and want advice, either from directing festivals to making their own films, to making music, to commercials. All these things. I've been fortunate to just have phone calls that are very transparent with them, and we say, this is what I struggled with. Is this something you're struggling with? Um,
Yeah.
if I have advice to offer, I always give it. So hopefully they can learn from some of my mistakes, and vice versa. They might tell me something that I hadn't, bridged yet. And it just becomes a mutually beneficial interaction.
Yeah, which is wonderful, and also, you know, is so helpful for people who are entering the industry. And part of the or no, the main reason really for starting these podcasts is to try and bridge the gap between education and industry. And I actually have a question for you. And we normally have a question from one of our students, but I took this one tonight.
Okay.
Um, I'm really interested to find out, when you are working to a brief on a commercial project,
Mhm.
how does that differ to when you are working to your own brief for your own project?
Um, so commercial projects, you're not really considering your own feelings. You're only considering the feelings of whoever the client is, whether you're shooting a wedding, a dental advertisement, a stereo headphone content, you're always thinking about the product and what the person who hired you wants. When it's short film or narrative or a feature, you get to be a little bit selfish in that because you
Yeah.
know what works for your sensibilities, and you're basically gambling with what viewers would want to watch. And you're saying,
Yes.
this is equal amounts my own therapeutic way of getting art out into the world, but it's also keeping in mind that I want to appeal to the widest range of people possible. When it's commercial briefs and pitches, it's always about uh, what is their demographic, and they're
Yeah.
going to know that better than you would.
Yeah.
So
And that's really interesting because also it's about the money,
yeah,
you know. You know, you want to get that gig, you want to make that money,
right.
so you have to follow their brief.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and to me, I don't care so much. It's not personal. Like, I can be a little bit more robotic, and just focus on technical aspects. Are we getting the lighting right? Is the sound not peaking? How is this going to look for this product? And even if the product is a person, um, and not to talk about it so technically, but that's how you kind of treat it. Is you have to look at whatever the product is that you're trying to appeal, and then you hone in on that and make your client happy.
And that's it, and then hopefully you get the gig again.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, Ali, it's really interesting to talk to you. You're so positive, and you're so full of positive energy. I wonder if you were to look back on your career to date, was there a time when you couldn't find that positivity?
Oh, absolutely. I would say all 9 years of engineering.
And did you, when you went into engineering, because I was so shocked at the beginning of this interview when you said engineering, when you went into engineering, was that because it was a proper job?
Yes, yes, absolutely. That was me doing what was safe.
Yeah,
We were also, I it was kind of during a time when the economy wasn't going well, and
yeah,
everybody was worried about job security. And I went into a job that made sense financially, and
yeah.
that was it for me. And I still tried to find silver linings every day. I enjoyed talking to people. I enjoyed working with people, but um, and I still appreciate that experience because I surprisingly still use it in film when staffing jobs. But the overwhelming or the overall look back on that 9 year process was that this is not me.
Yeah. No. And but you probably knew that before. You were doing the right thing. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of filmmakers still do that. A lot of filmmakers
Yeah.
still work full-time jobs that, they don't feel are playing to their strengths. And
No.
it's a very tough and fickle industry in that regard, because you're trying to do what you love. You're trying to make it financially feasible, and sometimes it's just a very long and scrutiny inducing process.
It is. And it's also, again, very interesting to hear you say that, because we often say to our students, don't, you've got to absolutely relish these moments coming in here to be creative.
Mhm.
I know you're tired. I know the days are long, but this is work. I mean, this is what we're calling work. My goodness me, this is,
Right.
something amazing. And not to cast any awful shadows on engineering, because that's a wonderful skill to have too.
Yeah.
But we are so lucky to do what we do, and that's just fact. And if we can make money at it, well, that's a better fact.
Right. And I love that outlook. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I've always said, like, a day on set is better than a day off set. So
Oh yeah.
it's worth it. It's worth it because at the end of the day, we get to do what a lot of people dream of doing. And, even if you are doing a full-time job, just keep reminding yourself that this is what you want.
Yeah.
Otherwise, stick with your full-time, whatever that other full-time is. If you think that makes more sense, and there's ever a day that you go into set and you're not nervous, stop doing it.
Yeah, for sure. That's really brilliant advice, Ali. And I think what's wonderful about that is that right now, during, this pandemic, it would be easy to give up on our dreams, and it would be easier to, say, right, okay, I need to park that there. I'm not doing that again. I'm going to move on to something else, or I'm going to go back to engineering, or I'm going to do what I should be doing. But like you say, it's also very important to be reflective and look at what you have created and use this time to do so, and step up the marketing, or do whatever you can as that one man band, incredible factory that you are. Looking back on your career, I mean, I can see, just as an overview, how many strings you have to your bow, how many strands you have developed. If you were to look back at it now, where you are now with the successes you now have, what would you look back and think was fabulous?
I think all of it is. I think it's kind of an all-encompassing experience. I love the spots where I failed. I appreciate those. I think everybody's like, well, no, the sound was off, or the color was off, or the performance was off. But I love all those moments, because without those, I would think I was flawless. And I don't want to be that person. I want to be the person that says, with this short, I learned this. With this song, I learned this. And it makes you who you are today. We still see filmmakers and musicians at the top where critics don't like it. And you have to take the good with the bad. And it's not a good thing to think that you're only competing, with nobody in your kind of, circle. I love the fact that I can look to my peers and appreciate things that they might have gotten right that I haven't. I love the fact that, all my failures were just as exciting as my successes.
That when you start writing books, which I presume you already have, I think that needs to be one of the final pages, or the opener. That really is something. Ali, it's been absolutely incredible to talk to you. I've got to say, I wasn't sure what to expect, because you are so dynamic in every role that you play in this industry that you are being very creative in. But I feel I've learned so much, and I'm so excited that our viewers are going to do the same. So all I think that really needs to be said here is, Ali, I think you are living the most fabulous life. You are a huge inspiration to us all. And I can't wait to be there when you are, making these orchestrations with full orchestras, and when you are, at those awards with the feature film that you choose to develop. And I'm delighted that we're going to be able to see some of your work at the end of this podcast today. So, Ali, thank you so much. I can't wait to talk to you again. I hope you would come back on the show another time to chat with us. And so therefore, Ali, thank you so very much. You are most definitely living the fabulous life.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And you've put a smile on my face for the rest of the month. So thank you so much. You're a ball of positivity and great energy. And so thank you for having me. I'm excited to come back.
Thanks, Ali. My pleasure. Thank you, darling.
Been this way so long, don't think I could change. A different night, but the story still sounds the same. Maybe someday I could find something new, but until that day I still go home with you. You, with you. Yeah, I still go home with you. With you, with you. Yeah, I still go home with you. With you, with you. Yeah, I still go